Ketchup. It's a staple on every table in America. Every diner. Every fast food counter. Every backyard barbecue. That red bottle. That distinct shade of red. That distinct thickness. That distinct taste. You think it's always been there. You think it's always been made from tomatoes. You think it's always been like this. None of those thoughts are correct. Ketchup was not always tomato-based. The word itself comes from a Southeast Asian fermented fish sauce. For most of its history in the Western world, ketchup was made from mushrooms, walnuts, oysters, and anchovies. Tomato ketchup arrived late, and when it did, it was unstable, inconsistent, and often dangerous. The ketchup you know today, thick, sweet, shelf-stable, tomato red, in that iconic glass bottle, did not come from folk tradition. It was deliberately and systematically designed by one man, one company, and a chemist who understood that the future of food was not flavor, but consistency. Henry John Heinz didn't invent ketchup. He didn't significantly improve its taste either. What he did was more important than both. He standardized it. He industrialized it. He lobbied the US government to write food safety laws that his competitors couldn't afford to comply with. And then he marketed the result as the only ketchup American families could trust. This is not a condiment story. This is the story of how one company used science, lobbying power, and a glass bottle to eliminate every competitor in a category and turn its product into the permanent default of American dining. To understand what Heinz did, you need to understand what ketchup was before him. The word ketchup, or ketchup, comes from the Hokkien Chinese ketchup. It was originally a fermented sauce made from fish and soybeans. It was brought to Europe in the 17th century by Dutch and British traders. It was dark and salty. Nothing like what you think of as ketchup today. In Britain and early America, ketchup referred to any pungent, fermented sauce. Mushroom ketchup, walnut ketchup, oyster ketchup, anchovy ketchup. These were the dominant forms throughout the 18th century. Tomato ketchup first appeared in American recipes in the early 19th century. But it had a serious problem. Tomatoes contain a lot of water and very few natural preservatives. A tomato-based sauce ferments quickly. Since home refrigeration didn't exist until the 20th century, early tomato ketchup spoiled within days. Manufacturers tried to solve this by loading it with preservatives, coal tar derivatives, sodium benzoate, formaldehyde, borax. These were not small amounts. In the 1880s and 1890s, some ketchup formulas contained enough sodium benzoate to cause neurological symptoms in regular consumers. The product sat on shelves for months, appearing stable while chemically degrading. Consumers had no way of knowing what was inside. By the late 19th century, buying ketchup was essentially a gamble. You didn't know what brand you were getting, what it contained, or whether it was safe. That uncertainty was Heinz's opportunity. Henry John Heinz founded his company in 1869. He first sold horseradish, then pickles, celery sauce, and vinegar. He entered the ketchup market in 1876. His formula differed from competitors in one key way: higher tomato solids, higher vinegar content, and higher sugar levels. Here's the chemistry. Heinz's formula reduced water activity, the amount of free water available for microbial growth. By increasing sugar and acid, he pushed the available water in his ketchup below the level where most microbes can survive. This made his product more stable without relying on chemical preservatives. This was a real technical advantage. But Heinz knew something critical. A technical advantage means nothing without a story. The story he chose was purity. In 1906, Heinz launched an aggressive campaign emphasizing that his product contained no artificial preservatives. While competitors still used sodium benzoate and formaldehyde, Heinz ketchup used neither. He printed the word pure prominently on his label. He distributed pamphlets explaining his process. He opened his factory to the public, welcoming thousands of visitors per year, purely to demonstrate clean production standards. This wasn't charity. It was strategy. Heinz had solved the preservation problem. His competitors hadn't. By making purity the defining feature of his product, he turned a technical solution into a moral standard, and used that standard to discredit every other ketchup on the market. From here, the story becomes more than food history. In 1906, the US Congress passed the Pure Food and Drug Act, banning adulterated and misbranded foods. It was a landmark in consumer protection. Heinz strongly lobbied for it. At the time, The law was controversial. Most manufacturers opposed it. Compliance required testing, documentation, and costly production changes. Large, clean producers supported it. Smaller ones resisted. Heinz had already solved the problem. His production was clean. His formula compliant. Supporting the law cost him nothing, but it wiped out his competitors. This wasn't just consumer protection. It was a barrier to entry. The law didn't create Heinz's dominance, but it locked it in. Within a decade, hundreds of small producers disappeared. The market consolidated around a few large firms. Heinz was the largest. This was regulatory strategy disguised as consumer advocacy. The Heinz ketchup bottle is one of the most recognizable packaging designs in American history. The octagonal glass shape, the narrow neck, the paper label, the metal cap. This design is not random. It's calculated. Heinz ketchup has a specific viscosity, resistance to flow. This comes from high tomato solids and sugar content. Pectin molecules interact in an acidic environment to create a non-Newtonian structure. At rest, it's thick and doesn't pour. Under force, it flows. When the force stops, it thickens again. This is called thixotropy. And that's why the bottle has a narrow neck. The narrow neck concentrates force, allowing controlled flow. It prevents spilling. A wide container would break this balance. The 57 embossed on the bottle isn't random either. It marks the narrowest point, where you should tap. 57 varieties itself is purely a marketing invention. In 1896, Heinz saw an advertisement and decided to use a number. At the time, the company had over 60 products. 57 wasn't accurate. It just sounded good. But it stuck. This captures Heinz's philosophy: technical truth in the background, trust in the foreground. Consistency, trust, control. By the 1920s, Heinz ketchup was no longer just a brand. It had become a default. People didn't compare. They chose it automatically. Being the default is the strongest position in any market. Heinz maintained it through two things: consistent taste and dominance in restaurants. The bottle on restaurant tables wasn't just distribution. It was advertising. Over time, Heinz became so widespread that its absence was noticeable. Its presence became invisible. The ketchup on your table today is not the natural outcome of culinary history. It's the result of decades of deliberate decisions. Heinz did make a better product. That's true. But he didn't stop there. He built a narrative. He shaped a law. He invented a number. He designed a bottle. He created a habit. The result wasn't just market leadership. It was cultural installation. Ketchup became as ordinary as a fork or a napkin. This isn't about winning competition. It's about ending it. The red bottle on your table is not a neutral object. It is the endpoint of a 100-year strategy. Let us know in the comments what we should cover next. Thanks for watching.